Welcome to Academic Poster Design with the MRC. This instruction session is meant to provide an overview of academic poster design. Academic posters allow you to present research quickly and efficiently, utilize the visuals that are key to your research, and engage others in conversation. But what makes a good academic poster? Is it something that's clearly conveyed, easy to read and understand, engaging, or thoughtful? At the heart of any presentation or poster is the purpose of the message. To present a clear and impactful message, you need to know if you are trying to inform, entertain, persuade, or inspire. Maybe you want to do a combination of all of these. Whatever the focus, you need to know this up front, as it informs how you will design your message and what you will include. For the purpose of this assignment, we're going to determine first who your audience is and then what you will say. You need to determine what are the most important points you want to convey and how are you going to present those visually. What images, graphs, charts will you use? Then you want to go ahead and sketch it out on paper first to get a good idea of exactly what you want to include. And then you move on to designing in the software. Remember, effective posters convey their information visually, they're easy to scan, they use as little text as possible, and they always offer a good, clean design. Let's go back to that question about what makes a good academic poster. Take a look at the next 3 slides and determine with each one what you think is working and what isn't. What do you think of this one? Is it a little cluttered? Do you feel like there's a lot going on? Are you sure where you should look first? Do you even know what they're talking about? How about here? It definitely has a lot more white space, and there are repetitive headings in the color purple with the same font. But do you still know what you're reading? Do you know where to look first or how it concludes? And finally, how about here? There is a lot more white space here. They have seemed to use a consistent color palette and a 3-column design. But is it still too distracting? Are there still too many images? Is there still too much text? Talking about images, let's figure out what's the best way to use those in your assignment. Here we have 2 examples, essentially conveying the same thing. One depends heavily on icons, the other has a mixture of icons and photos. The main thing to remember when you're using icons and photos is that they're large enough to see and that they make an impact. All of your images should be 300 pixels per inch at least, and then you want to calculate them according to the size of your poster. So, you would say the desired dimension times 300 is the required pixels for each image. So say you want this one image to be 5 inches wide. 5 times 300 is 1500 pixels. So you should look for an image that's at least 1500 pixels wide. Let's talk about layout next. When you're creating a poster in PowerPoint, you want to do it at the printed size. Go to the Design tab, choose your slide size, and select Custom. Then you want to put in your width, height that you want your final poster to be. Next, you'll want to decide how to chunk your content. Do you want a traditional 3-column layout like the one seen here? Or would you like a 2-column layout? Think about how much you're trying to convey and what's going to work best. You always want to make sure that there's visual separation between the chunks of content. So you can see on the left-hand side, in the shaded area, they've used boxes to separate the introduction from the materials and methods. On the other side, they've used color and lines. With your headings, you want to make sure that your text is close to your heading, so it's easier for the people to read. On the left-hand side, you can see that the font and the text body is too far from the introduction and the methods sections. On the right-hand side, it makes sense. They're closer together and easier to read. You always want to make the most important stuff big. So if you have a heading, like results here, you want to make that bigger than the body of your text. On the left, the example is not so good. It's prizing all of the narrative when this is a visual display. You want to make sure your images are equally as large or larger. And you don't know that it's a results area because results is about the same size font as the body of the text. On the right-hand side, you can see that results is a different color, it's underlined, and it's a larger font size than the narrative text. All of this is visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy guidelines require that you make your headings stand out. Here are a list of examples that you could use. You don't want to use all of these. You want to pick one and stick with it through the entire body of your poster. You could use a simple bold text, small caps. You could underline a bold text, do a dotted line, a color block, a knockout block, or an all caps increased spacing. Let's talk about alignment, repetition, and balance now. This is really the heart of good poster design. Principle number 1 is alignment, and that means that you want every element on the poster to be visually connected to something else. You want to use guidelines to align everything precisely. So you can see here in the example that the introduction is to the left, the results are in the middle. It makes it, the results area, the most important part to look at. They use a grid system or a guideline. They're lining up every element exactly. If you do a left-aligned text, it does appear to be more modern. You never want to center-aligned text blocks longer than 2 to 3 lines because it makes it difficult to understand where you begin. Principle number 2 is repetition. You want to repeat aspects of the design throughout the poster. That would be color, font. Here, have they applied the repetition principle? What do you think? Are all of the headings the same color font? No. Are all the headings the same font size? No. Are all the headings the same font? No. What about the font in general? It seems like they're using about 3 or 4 of these. Here's another example where they are clearly using the repetition principle. All of the headings are the same color. All of the headings are the same font and font size. Clearly you can see the 3-column display, and they've used a good amount of images to balance the narrative. For font guidelines, you want to make sure that you're not using more than 2 fonts. It's a good idea to use a sans serif for your headings and a serif for the body text. Font size suggestions. For your title, try to be around 85 point. Your author and headings shouldn't exceed 56 point. The body of your text should be 30 to 40 point, and your small text for captions and citations should be about 24 point. We also suggest that you try to find a font pairing that looks good. These are some examples that we think work well. You can use fonts with more personality, but you want to use them sparingly. A decorative font for titles or headers is fine, but the body text should always be simple and very legible. If you're not happy with the fonts that you have in your package on your computer, you can go to these sites in the lower right-hand corner for more. Color is also very important in the design of your poster. As with the fonts, you want to stick to 2 or 3 colors consistently. You want to choose an appropriate color palette. Don't use something whimsical and light for a subject that is serious. Your text colors should be dark enough to be very legible, and it's always a good idea to begin with a background that's white. If you need additional online color tools, check out Adobe Color or Color Palette Generator. Principle number 3 is balance. This means the visual weight of the design should be equally distributed. Again, here's this not so great example. This has terrible balance. in addition to not having the right fonts or colors appropriate for the subject, you've got all of your narrative on the top of the page and all of your images on the lower part. It's not balanced at all. Here, the balance principle is well applied. Again, you have a nice mix of narrative and images. The colors and the fonts are equally weighted and everything looks in proportion. Overall, your balance guidelines should tell you that you want to use the least amount of text possible for a poster that's about 500 words or less. And you always want to strive for 20% text, 40% visuals, and 40% white space. On the left-hand side, you can see an example, our same example, that's not so good. On the right-hand side, you can see the example that's much better. Why don't you take a few minutes to compare the two? Again, remember, the balance guidelines suggest that you strive for 20% text, 40% visuals, and 40% white space. You want to include an image with each section if possible, and you don't want to use a lot of words. Try to stick to 500 or less for your poster. And ultimately, look for visuals in a variety of sizes and shapes to balance everything out and make everything visually interesting. Let's move on to data visualization. If you want to use graphs and charts in your presentation, don't use the default graph. You do want to stick with something that is simple and uncluttered. You might want to go with exploratory or explanatory, or something that combines a little bit of everything but still is easy to read. That's even easier to read. Or maybe you come up with a combination like this. For more help with data visualization, you can contact Lauren Bruckner and the Davis Library Research Hub. Now let's talk about image resources. If you need more images, icons, you can go to the Noun project, or you can Google an image search and make sure that you use the tools to limit usage rights to labeled for reuse, and make sure the size is larger than 2 MB. You can also go here to download the UNC logo, or check out these stock photo websites, Unsplash, Pexels, and Pixabay. Now let's choose some software to use. We suggest working with either Microsoft PowerPoint or Adobe InDesign. Piktochart is also available freely online, but it has limited templates to start with. The advantages of using Microsoft PowerPoint is that it's relatively easy to learn, it's pretty accessible software, and it has everything you need to get started on a good poster. Adobe InDesign is a little more professional. You have more fine-tuned control over the design, but it has a steep learning curve. Either way, we have a lot of resources online here. We have templates included, a couple of short videos, and some more information. So if you need more help online, check this site out or give us an email at mrc.unc.edu.